The tip this week is about one row horizontal buttonhole, which is one of my favorite buttonholes because it is strong, it can be any size, and it doesn't require any additional finishing. It will last longer than the garment, most likely. Now, to work this buttonhole, you work up to where the opening is to begin. And the first step is to anchor the first stitch of the buttonhole. And I'm going to bring my yarn forward, slip this stitch, pull it in the back, and this is going to provide an anchor, and we're going to see that we do something very similar at the other end. Now, I need to bind off the stitches for the buttonhole. And your typical bind off, you knit the stitch and then you pass the stitch over. And what that does is it takes your working yarn to the end of your row. We want to leave our working yarn right here. So I'm going to use a different bind off where I just simply pass the stitch over. I'm going to pass this stitch over. And this provides a very, very, very firm edge. It is much firmer and stronger than a typical bind off. Now at this point, it's important for you to pay attention. You want to keep close count of the number of stitches that you bind off because you're going to need to add that number of stitches in a minute. And so I'm going to count very carefully. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I want my buttonhole to be 6 stitches long. And you can see that that's a very nice looking cast on edge, bind off edge, sorry. And it is very sturdy. Now my working yarn is all the way over here. So at this point, I turn my work, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cast on the same number of stitches as I bound off +1. And we'll see what that +1 is for in a minute. Now the best cast on you could use for this is the cable cast on. It is a very non-stretchy cast on. It is firm as can be, and it will match this edge. Now what I do is with the cable cast on, you can use it knitwise or you can use it purlwise. And what I do is I work it purlwise because then it is going to provide an edge that is similar to the one on the other side. This is more obvious in a knit one purl one rib than it is in stockinette. But this is just a little something I do. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then my extra one, 7. Now I really suggest you count these as you go along because when you look back at this, sometimes it looks like, oh, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And keep in mind, that is the first stitch. I made my first stitch between this stitch and that stitch. So it kind of looks like it's one that you've cast on. It's not. And if you notice that this is giving me a very smooth edge, which if I were doing this in knit one purl one, it would look like that. Otherwise, this edge would look like that, which I don't care for. Now, I'm ready to go on. And the first step is that I'm going to slip the first stitch to this needle, and I'm going to pass that extra stitch over the stitch, and that's going to give me a little added reinforcement. And then I work to the end of the row. Now, when I turn this and work, I work in whatever stitch pattern I've got. And hopefully, if I've counted correctly, I've cast on the same number of stitches as my opening plus that extra one to lock it, and I'm ready to roll. And the cable cast on is very firm. It is a good match for the regular cast on. Now the thing to keep in mind about buttonholes is any buttonhole going to be perfectly beautiful? Probably not. But the deal is there's going to be a button closing this. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. So that's 1 row horizontal buttonholes.